You had your coffee. That's good.
It's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Although 3 hours without topping up on coffee could be getting dodgy towards the end. Oh, stick that out.
Okay, we will start at 11.
Okay. Organized. I even have my script. Oh, we haven't got any last minute requests from Hadi or anything, have we?
Sorry? No, no, no. We are live. We have 14 attendees as of now. Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Mohammed Aslam from Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award Office. I really apologize for the delay. Just give us a moment. We will be starting shortly. Thank you.
joint temporary عشان يفتح عندي. Okay.
Fatma, your mic is on now. Let Professor Hadi get a few words with us so that we can start the session.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, Prof, go ahead. We can hear you.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very sorry for this unintended delay due to technical problem in my machine. I would like to, on behalf of, speaking now with both hats as Coordinator General of Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award, as well as VP Corporate Excellence, DIWA, would like to welcome my colleagues, Dr. Matt Fisher and Muhammad Aslam from the Award Office to this orientation seminar of the Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award, in which we are participating this year. And as we all know, it is on the previous model that DIWA previously won in 2017 of EFKM Global. Matt Fisher is the past COO of the EFQM, and he was the master behind this model in the past. He will be talking to us about the strategic message of Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award model. And before that, Muhammad Aslam will walk us briefly on the essence of the Sheikh Khalifa program as one of the major local awards, and now is opening globalized and also representative of the FKM in the region, now being tagged as a reference organization. This session will be interactive for this coming 3 hours. There'll be an opportunity, very good opportunity for questions and answers from the speakers, as well as any clarifications as to the award process and cycle. And due to this late arrival, and without further ado, I will hand over to Muhammad Aslam to start the introduction, and then over to Matt to start the presentation. Thank you all for.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the opening session, for your opening remarks. Good morning, everyone. Once again, we really apologize for the delay. We are delighted to have you all in today's webinar. Thank you very much for joining in, and I hope you all are doing well. At the outset, on behalf of Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award Abu Dhabi Chamber, I would like to welcome you all to this webinar, which is being organized exclusively for your organization. The purpose of this webinar is to give you better understanding of SKEA award, its objectives, and its benefits to the business community, and how it can provide a world-class roadmap for sustainable excellence in order to achieve total quality standard. Besides that, we will also shed some light on SKEA assessment process, timeline, submission document, feedback, report, so on and so forth. Also, we would like to try to touch a bit on new normal post-COVID-19 in terms of business agility and business continuity and importance of performance excellence models in managing the current crisis. So SKEA was launched by the Abu Dhabi Chamber way back in 1999 under the patronage of His Highness Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of UAE, and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, as a blueprint and a methodology for enhancing the productivity and profitability of small to large sized organizations from diversified sectors in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. But soon after that, under the able leadership of His Excellency Saeed Al Fahim, Chairman of SKEA, and His Excellency Hilal Al Muhairi, Director General of Abu Dhabi Chamber, and under the able guidance of Professor Hadi Al Tijani, SKEA Coordinator General, SKEA had a huge surge in applications year after year. And due to the growing popularity, it was open for companies within the UAE. And from the past few years, as Professor Hadi said, due to increased demand from the region, it was open for GCC organizations as well. So therefore, the SKEA program is not only catering to the UAE organizations, but now spans across the GCC. And I'm extremely proud to tell you, over the years, SKEA had contributed immensely in developing the performances of thousands of organizations and trained hundreds of assessors from different backgrounds, including UAE nationals. So many organizations tend to believe that SKEA is a competition. But let me tell you, it is all about, it is not a competition to win or lose, but it is a framework that helps organizations to enhance their competitiveness. It supports in developing a robust management system through which organizations can manage key performances and processes efficiently and effectively. Moreover, it encourages organizations to be more creative and innovative in the way they design and offer their products and services and manage business operations. Further, it provides assistance in achieving organizational vision and strategic goals. And finally, and importantly, it encourages benchmarking your key performances with the best practices that of local, regional, and world-class organizations. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank the top management and project team of DEWA for showing interest in SKEA and applying for award this year. We sincerely hope that DEWA will benefit from SKEA participation, and we believe SKEA shall add value in DEWA's journey to sustainable excellence. Before I pass on to my expert panelist, please allow me to introduce them. Besides Professor Hadi Al Tijani, I have with me Matt Fisher, Organizational Excellence Expert, and Ms. Wisdan Saleh, SKEA Consultant for Awards and Organizational Excellence Programs. Matt Fisher doesn't need any introduction. Matt Fisher is going to present today's session. He's a very well-known expert in the field of business excellence. He had worked with the EFQM as a Chief Operations Officer. He had been one of the main architects of EFQM Excellence Model version 2010 and 2013. And during his tenure with the EFQM, he was very instrumental in designing EFQM training materials and publications. Moreover, he is currently supporting Abu Dhabi Government Excellence Program, Dubai Government Excellence Program, and Prime Minister Office Dubai also he's supporting. And besides that, also he's running his own consultancy firm that provides business and management consulting and training services. And last but not least, he is also one of the elite SKEA jury members. On the other hand, I have Ms. Wisdan Saleh from Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award. She is a management consultant, and she will be responding to your questions about SKEA during the session and at the end. Myself, Mohammed Aslam, I'm one of the key members of our team. I'm a specialist in organizational excellence. I'm also a mentor for SKEA assessment teams. So I would be more happy to assist you with your SKEA application and to be part of this wonderful journey of learning and knowledge transfer. Let me tell you about this webinar. This is going to last for 3 hours. We have a prayer break at 12:30. So effectively from here, we will have 1 hour session, and 12:30 we'll have a prayer break for 15 minutes. And we will start after that. After 15 minutes, we will start. So please stay put and stay with us, as this is an important session for you to understand SKEA and kickstart your preparations for it. We shall open the floor for questions in the end. You could also put across all your questions in the chat box or QA box, and we will try to address all of them during the session. We shall also try to take your request to open the mic at the end of the session to make it more interactive. I hope if time permits. Therefore, I sincerely hope that this session will meet all your expectations and the goals that you have set or looking forward to it. So let us begin. Matt, thank you very much for joining in, and Wisdan, thank you very much for joining in. And Matt, you please take over.
Okay, thanks, Mohammed. Has been introduced. My name's Matt Fisher. I was previously the Chief Operating Officer of EFQM, and while I was there, I was the principal author of this 2013 version of the model. So hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights into how it works. As Mohammed said, as we're going through this, the mics are off. You can use the chat box, the Q&A box, to ask questions. I will come to these at the end of the session. To be brutally honest and frank with you, I'm not very good at multitasking when it comes to doing this, so I will lose my flow in the presentation. So as the questions for you come up, put them into the box, and then at the end of the session, we'll come back and answer those questions and hopefully open the mics and actually have a chance to discuss these things. Because I think really with an organization like DEWA, who's actually won the EFQM Excellence Award before, yes, those questions are going to be some of the important parts for you. But anyway, I shall take you through what we have. In terms of the objectives, excuse me. In terms of the objectives, I'll take you through the why, the what, and the how. In terms of why the SKEA Award is crucial to Abu Dhabi's business community, what the Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Scheme actually is, and how it can help provide a world-class roadmap towards quality and excellence. So the Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award was established back in 1999 to promote the concepts of business excellence within Abu Dhabi, the UAE, and the wider region. And the award itself recognizes the achievements of organizations in the field of excellence and provides role models to inspire other organizations on their own journey towards excellence. But as Mohammed said earlier, it's not really about winners and losers. It's about helping organizations to drive their journey towards excellence, to increase the competitiveness. It's about benchmarking with and learning from world-class organizations and then using those insights to unleash their full potential. The end goal for SKEA is to transform and strengthen the economy of Abu Dhabi and the UAE, enabling us to achieve a competitive edge in the global economy and ultimately enhance the well-being of all our citizens. So everyone is a winner, not just the organizations that collect the award. And to build healthy organizations, we need to consider a number of different elements that impact the ability to learn, adapt, and evolve to achieve ongoing and sustainable success. Now, some of these issues are hard systems, and we're pretty good at looking at those types of things. So technology, processes, assets. But the others are the soft systems, people, organizational culture, attitudes and behaviors. And to achieve excellence, these elements need to be designed, aligned, and working in harmony. And that's one of the key reasons that organizations should participate in SKEA. It's to learn from others, to share their own experiences so that others can learn from them, to build their strengths so that they can actively contribute to strengthening the nation. It's about creating a win-win environment. A strong, diverse, and vibrant economy within Abu Dhabi benefits all of us. And to shape our future, we need to be aware of what's going on within the wider global ecosystem. It's not just about copying world class, because if you copy world class, the best you can hope to achieve is number 2. To be number 1, we need to engage our people, unleash our potential, and create new innovative solutions and ways of working that actively lead disruption within the ecosystem, raising the bar for others to follow. We live and work in an ever-changing world. Oil prices fluctuate, supply chains have gone global, and my slide has gone nuts. Apologies for that. I've gone the wrong way as well. Oil prices fluctuate. Supply chains have gone global, and cities are getting smart. Organizations have to adapt and evolve to survive, innovate to remain competitive, seeking new ideas of energy. One of the things that we obviously have all experienced recently is the attack of the spiky footballs, or COVID-19 as some people are calling it. Overnight, it seemed like everything had changed. But had it really? I think maybe because we all had to stop and stand still for a while, we got a chance to look at what's been happening and recognize the change. And changes aren't always good. Change is change. What we want to ensure is that it's change for the better. Everyone knows oil prices fluctuate, and this has been happening for years. And if your economy is too dependent on it, those changes can play havoc for everybody. At one point during the COVID lockdown, crude prices went negative. But we've known for years alone that we can't depend on oil alone. We need to look at alternatives. Hopefully, someone out there has that idea. Another thing that we've discovered during the lockdown was just how many of us could work effectively from home, enabled by technology and infrastructure that was already there, but its potential was not being fully realized. Now we know that it works. How many of us are going to go back to the way things were before? And as we move into what people are calling the new world post-COVID, we can't forget the old problems that we had before. They haven't gone away. We're still looking at issues around customer satisfaction and loyalty, people retention and happiness, market share, and sustainability. And there's no doubt that COVID has caused a massive disruption. We're all living through it, and we're still living through it at the moment. But it's also created a whole set of new opportunities. And it will be the organizations that have the vision and the ability to transform those visions into reality that will shape the future, to determine what the new normal is. And isn't that how we define an excellent organization? Someone who shapes the future, someone who raises the bar and raises the standards that others then follow. Which brings us on to talking about what an excellence organization is, and what it looks like. What does it do to be considered excellent? And for the 19th cycle of the Sheikh Khalifa Excellence Award, we'll be using the 2013 version of the EFQM Excellence Model. So what I'll do now is take you through the model and look at how it defines organizational excellence. And I'll start that from the beginning, looking at the way organizations work and why we need a model. So who is it that organizations think they work for? The traditional view is the shareholders, or the owners, or the political masters if you're in the public sector. They would be the ones that we're working for. And in terms of what they want and expect, it's kind of easy to know. They want a return on their investment. They want us to look at optimizing profitability, and they want to ensure sustainable financial growth. And I'm pretty sure that even as we arrive in the fantastic new normal, that view will not change. But if a shareholder or an investor wants a return on investment, from an internal perspective, we have to focus on optimizing the profitability. We also have to look at balancing the long-term needs and the sustainability of the business model against those short-term demands for a return on the investment. If we want to ensure sustainable financial growth, we need to focus on our customers and make sure that we keep them satisfied and hopefully loyal to us. And to do this, we need to develop and deliver products and services that add value to them. We also need to deliver excellent service to maximize retention, loyalty, and build our reputation. And who delivers this to our customers? It's our people. An organization is only as good as the people who work in it. And if we want to attract, retain, and fully engage people, we need to have opportunities to grow. They need to feel cared for, that their efforts are recognized and appreciated. They need to be proud of the organization that they work in, the products and services that they deliver, and feel that they are making a positive contribution to the world around them. So the ability to attract and retain talented people isn't just about what goes on inside the organization. It's also about the contribution to and perceptions of wider society. Are we talking about the great Well, some organizations, it might be the case. We are talking about the general public. But in most organizations, there are some key stakeholder groups within society who either influence us or people that we want to influence. They could be potential customers, they could be potential partners, or potential investors. If we want to be attractive to them, to engage them in our journey, we need to have a strong brand reputation. We need to be able to demonstrate that we adopt the highest standards of ethical behaviors in all of our actions. We need to have transparent and proactive communication and reporting to build this trust over time. And how do we achieve this? We need leaders who inspire trust at all times, who are role models for the organization's values and integrity. They need to have a clear vision for the future, develop the strategies that will achieve these goals, and engage the stakeholders to join them. The organization needs to have robust internal processes to ensure they manage their resources effectively and efficiently, and the right partners and suppliers to help deliver this. So, back to the original question. Who do we work for? We work for all these different stakeholder groups, and it's part of the job of an organization's leaders to establish a dialogue with them to understand what they expect. And of course, we can't deliver everything that everyone wants all the time. That's why we need to create that dialogue so we can effectively balance these different and sometimes conflicting expectations and come up with a plan that works for everyone. Now, how do we manage this level of complexity? How do we coordinate the activities of the organizations to achieve that juggling act required to balance the different stakeholder needs? Well, wouldn't it be great if there was some sort of framework that helps us make sense of all of this? And we think there is. The FQM Excellence Model provides a holistic tool for assessing how effective an organization is in developing and delivering stakeholder-focused strategy. The 4 result areas on the this side, which would be the right-hand side, they focus on what's important to those 4 different key stakeholder groups. And because it's a non-prescriptive framework and can be applied to any organization, regardless of size, sector, or maturity. At its simplest level, the model can be viewed as a cause and effect diagram. If we want to achieve a different result, we need to change something we do within the organization. In the model, the things we do are split into the 5 enabling criteria: leadership, strategy, people, partnerships and resources, and processes, products, and services. Because what is considered excellent today will only be considered as adequate tomorrow, there is the continual improvement loop, feeding back the learning from the results achieved and using the creativity and innovation to drive increased value for our stakeholders. So, how does it work? Well, let's think of the organization as a car. There's lots of different parts working together. And pick one of those parts, say the engine. Think of that as the production, the main operations of the organizations. We can define very, very exact specifications for each component within that engine. But is that enough for the engine to work at its best? It doesn't matter how well each of those individual parts are. They do have to be made to the highest standards and the highest specifications. But if they haven't been correctly assembled and tuned, you're not going to get the optimum performance from the engine. And the EFQM model gives us a tool for doing that, making sure that the components are the required standard and that they're working together seamlessly to optimize performance. The model is made up of 3 component parts, and together they help us understand the current level of excellence within the organization that we're assessing. They help us take that view of not just how the engine room is working, but then how it fits within the whole car. It's no good having the best engine in the world if you haven't got tires on the car, or your brakes don't work. You might get to your destination very quickly, but you're not going to be able to stop when you get there. And of course, if you haven't put any petrol in the car in the first place, it might look fantastic sitting in front of your house, but it's not going to go anywhere. So what I'm going to do now is take you through the 3 different parts of the model and see how they fit together to help us understand this holistic view of the organization and understand how we put these things together. And this is really where advanced organizations stand out from average organizations or people that we assess. It's being able to show how everything fits together. Not only that each of the individual parts have reached a high level of excellence, but how they interact together to give us something that is greater than the sum of the individual parts themselves. So, fundamental concepts of excellence. That is the big view of the organization, the overview, stepping back and looking at everything from that holistic process. Now, there's a number of building blocks of excellence which sit in here. One of the key things is getting different teams, departments, and functions to work together, to coordinate their actions and activities. And the fundamental concepts bring these wider concepts that we're talking about together. And in an excellent organization, these themes will run through these different functions and departments like red threads. Effectively, they're embedded within the DNA of the organization. Part of the way people do things, just the way the organization works. And as leaders, we need to be able to see that big picture. Understand what needs to happen, how, where, and when, and who needs to do it. We need to be able to check what we think is happening is actually really happening. And that what we've asked our people to do is actually delivering the outcomes that we expected. So the 8 fundamental concepts give us these red threads, and these run through the model as well as through the organization. Now, one of the ways of summarizing an assessment is summarizing them based on these concepts. I'll come back to this in terms of the SKEA process later on. But the idea behind it is, if we summarize a fundamental concept level, it helps provide leaders with insights into these areas to understand those red threads, to pull the different information together that we're getting from a more detailed perspective and make sense of it at a strategic level. In terms of the model, these concepts are put in alphabetical order to show that there is no difference between them. None of them is more important than the others. Now that's from a model perspective. From an organizational perspective, depending on what your strategies are, the ecosystem that you work in, the level of maturity, or your strategic priorities at any given time, some of these concepts are going to be more important than others. And that's fine. That's actually a good thing. If people say that everything is a priority, it might sound fantastically impressive, but if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. You need to understand where the focus are and working out if there's a specific fundamental concept or couple of concepts that are more important to an organization at a certain point, working out how we're going to make ourselves excellent in those areas, because that's one of the things that will make us distinctive and unique amongst our peer group. And when things are distinctive and unique, that's when we start talking about excellence. Yeah. Now, the criteria of the model can be considered as the engine. I've mentioned previously that at its basic level, the model can be used as a cause and effect diagram. If we want something to happen, we need to take action. Once we've taken the action, we can measure the impact that that action has had, understand what's going on, and based on what we observe and learn, we can then fine-tune the approaches that we've adopted. We can look at how we can improve their efficiency and effectiveness to help us reach our strategic goals. I'm not going to start going in and reading all of the criteria in detail. In the most mature organizations, this is the bit that we really need to focus on. This is the bit that really makes the difference. It's understanding of the actions we take, how we measure the impact, and how we learn and grow based on that observation. And if we have that loop established everywhere in the organization, this is how we really drive excellence moving forward. We call these strategic themes. The criteria enable us to think in more detail about the actions that we need to take to achieve the strategic goals that have been set. So we start with the vision. Where is it that we want to get to? We then develop a plan on how we're going to make that vision a reality. Now, it's the job of leadership to manage that implementation. And that's going to involve engaging our people, making sure that we have the right partnerships and resources in there to support that delivery. It could change the way that we deliver our processes and products and services. As we move across, there will be measures to help us understand what's going on, the leading indicators, if you like, that will help us understand, are people receiving the training that they need, for example? Have we recruited the people that we needed to do this? Have we got the resources in place? Am I getting a return on the investment that I'm putting in? Are the changes that we talked about to our products and services effective? And in the end, those leading indicators will help us predict the outcome, the strategic result that we wanted to get. And there will be learning loops feeding back both from the leading indicators, which will help us at an operational level improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of what we do. And then there's a strategic learning loop coming back in from the outcomes. Did our fantastic plan help us achieve our vision? And this feeds back into leadership through the management system and the way that we actively steer the organization. The results feed back into that process to help inform the decision-making process, where we actually decide, is it that our approach is not properly deployed? Therefore, we need to look at a deployment issue and work out what's happening in that type of area. Or is it that the approach itself is not sufficient to achieve the vision that we have? In which case, what do we need to do differently? Let's think of this in terms of a practical example. I always find that a practical example helps. So during the lockdown, I've let myself go a bit. My wife and probably my doctor say I need to lose a few kilos. So I have a vision of what I look like. It might be slightly diluted, as I probably need a haircut and a shave, for starters, but that's my vision. So my strategy is to take a two-pronged attack on porkiness. I need more exercise, and I need to eat more healthily. I make a plan for the next 3 months. I'm going to join a gym, now that they're open again, and I'm going to look up some recipes on food that are high in taste and low on fat, because I'm not going to eat rabbit food. And I need to follow that plan. Now, losing weight is the goal, but I'm going to be able to put some predictive indicators that help me understand how I'm progressing and whether I'm likely to get there. So, am I actually going to the gym? I know I've joined, but am I actually going there? And when I go there, am I actually going there to do exercise, or am I just going and hanging out in the cafe because they have nice cakes? Am I sticking to the plan? And one of the things that starts to happen as this goes on is you get compliments from friends. People start noticing, hey, have you lost weight? And this helps encourage things. Ultimately, obviously, I want people to say, hey, you look exactly like Johnny Depp. And these will help me understand whether I'm on target. But the ultimate arbiter of this is the customer. And sometimes getting close to the target is good enough. Sometimes getting to the target isn't good enough, and that target needs to be revised. And that's where the dialogue with stakeholders comes in. Now, organizations don't often talk about losing weight. So maybe that example's a little bit abstract. But maybe it's not, because weight in an org costs. It's about overheads. So when organizations, they don't talk about losing weight, they talk about reducing costs. And the principle is exactly the same. It starts with the vision. What is it the leaders want to achieve from the organization? What is the goal? What is the strategic direction? And that then needs to be translated into a hard strategy, a plan, developed from an analysis of the current cost levels and the opportunities that have been identified to reduce these costs. That plan needs to be communicated to engage people. Budgets need to be agreed. And then they need to be translated into the operations of the organization. We need maybe to look at increasing process efficiency, maybe developing more cost-effective solutions, and managing the costs associated with delivering those products and services. And again, we can put in predictive indicators that we can use to understand how things are going, things like productivity, progress against the plan, reducing waste or consumption. And these will help us know whether we're going on target. But again, the ultimate arbiter is the customer. If we're putting in place cost-cutting measures, we need to make sure we don't have a negative impact on the customers. We need to keep those loops in place to understand how we're going. And this concept of putting things together, understanding these linkages, this is the key bit to driving excellence within the organization, especially within large organizations. It's coordinating these different actions, because these will be happening in different places within the organizations. Different departments, different functions will need to do their bit. And if one person is not doing it, or one group of people is not doing it, then the whole thing will fall down. And that's why we need those different predictive measures in place, so that we can understand what's working and what's not working, so that we can take appropriate. And if everyone is doing what we said in the plan, and it's not giving us the result that we want, we need to go back and look at the plan and work out, why isn't it working? What did we misunderstand when we were developing the strategy, when we were developing the action plan? What do we need to do? And that thinking is the radar logic, the bit that's driving to. In an assessment, it's how we understand the detail. But at a management level, it's looking at, once we've understood how the different parts need to fit together, understand how effectively they are working together. So the radar logic, at the basic level, we define what are the results that we want to achieve. This is part of the plan. We then develop the approaches that we need to be able to deliver that. Once we've worked out that plan, we need to systematically deploy the approaches, which means making sure that we have the right resources in place, making sure that we have appropriate processes and documentation so that these things are repeatable. And in excellent organizations, it's making sure that we are deploying them in a way that helps us be agile. If it takes us 3 years to implement something, maybe we've missed the window of opportunity that we'd identified in the strategy. We need to look at the speed as well as the robustness of the deployment. That's something that we always need to take into account. And if it takes us 3 years to implement something, how long is it going to take us to implement a change that we identify when we assess the impact and we want to refine it based on the learning and the analysis? Because some isn't quite right first time. And this is that cycle that's driving through organizations, as well as the basis for the assessment and the scoring approach within the EFQM model. This is actually a very powerful, because this is what we're looking at doing in terms of supporting the decision-making processes within any organization. Looking at making sure we've defined what success looks like and what are the conditions that will deliver that success for us. Putting in place the leading indicators that will show us, are we moving in the right direction? Are we moving at the right speed? And if we're not, where do we need to fine tune? Where do we need to make adjustments? We don't want to have to pull the whole engine out of the car and rebuild it from scratch if it's just we've got a dirty spark plug. We need to have that analysis to help us understand exactly where the issues are, which makes it easier for us to take timely, efficient, and accurate steps that will drive that improvement through. I mean, it's massively inefficient and expensive and takes a huge amount of time to remove the engine from a car. That's the same within the organization. If we can't put our finger on exactly where the issue is, we have to spend a lot of time trying to work out what's going on, and that's time wasted. That reduces the agility of the organization. And one of the key things that we're seeing, not just in the post-COVID world, but it's been an increasing trend for the last 10, 15 years, is agility, organizational agility, being able to rapidly respond and adapt. And as we move forward into the post-COVID world, one of the words that we're going to be hearing much more frequently is anti-fragility. Agility, in terms of the actual meaning of it, just means you are able to duck and dive. So you can dodge what's happening. Anti-fragility is actually building learning in around that, so that as the organization goes through turbulence, it learns, it adapts, and it actually becomes stronger. So the more stress you put on the organization, the stronger it gets. And that's the concept that people are now looking at. So agility just means being able to duck and dive. We have the robustness of an organization, but robustness implies rigidity. And it's about creating that right balance between being robust, being able to survive the knocks, and being agile and being able to adapt and moving on, so that actually the stress that you come on as an organization, you grow from that. And this radar logic works at all levels within the organization, both in terms of the strategic loop that we're looking for, in terms of are we achieving things, but also at an operational level. And if everyone is thinking about this, it's about those cause and effect relationships. Planning the action that you're going to take, taking that action in a systematic and way that should deliver that plan, measuring the impact of that, learning, observing what's going on, pulling in key information, and then using that to drive improvement. And some of those loops are going to be happening at a strategic level on a long scale, years. Others are going to be happening on a much quicker basis, on a monthly, weekly, daily basis, sometimes even quicker than that. So if you think about the response at times within call centers, for example, that's done real time. You're constantly looking at how many calls are in the queue, what's the response time, and adjusting the performance, shifting how many people are on call mode, how many people are doing back office. You can create that balance to optimize the performance, to make sure at any given time people's calls are answered as quickly as possible. But when you get that slack period, moving people across to do back office process work that makes maximum use of their time and the resources available to the organization. And that's thinking through the radar logic. But you have to have the processes in place to be able to shift people from one task to another very, very rapidly to respond to that time level. And that's really what we're looking at within this radar logic. So we look at building things back up. The radar helps us analyze and understand in detail what we're looking at. We then look at the strategic themes that we mapped across the model to understand how these things should be put together, how they should be functioning. And finally, we then consolidate that view, either through the fundamental concepts or by grouping up on the strategic themes, helping us to provide leaders with concise and holistic overview of the organization, the current strengths and the opportunities for improvement. And the key thing with the assessment, we talked earlier on about winning and losing. One of the key things within the assessment is, why are you doing it as an organization? Are you doing it to learn, or are you doing it to win? Now, before I worked at EFQM, I worked at Rico Europe, managing the internal processes. So I'm not entirely green to this. When we were going for external assessments, we would be very clear internally about what the objective of it was. Now, a lot of the time we were looking at, okay, so we have the target that we want to achieve, say 5 stars. But other than that, we need to make sure that we achieve the 5 stars, but other than that, there is some specific learning point that we want. One of the projects I was involved in was pulling together an assessment of the whole of the RICO Europe organization, and RICO being a Japanese company, their idea of the European operations is basically anything within that time scale, within that time zone. So it did include the whole of Europe, across from Ireland to Russia, from Finland and Norway in the north down to Portugal and Italy. But it also included the Middle East operations, right down to South Africa, because that's all roughly within that time zone. So we looked at pulling together an assessment for that whole organizational group. And the key learning that we wanted to get out of it, we obviously wanted to get 5 stars recognized for excellence, but we also wanted another view. We had some issues in the way the new integrated system for effectively managing the workflow of the organization was working. And we had been looking at things, trying to work it through. So I'd sit down with the assessors in the initial briefing and tell them, this is one of the priorities. This is what we've been looking at. This is our understanding of what happens. So as part of the assessment, can you have another look at this? Because there's still some bits that I'm not quite sure where it's not working as well as we thought. Can you look at this and give me that external perspective? So it's pulling that learning in to help us to bring in those insights. Now, when we're putting organizations in for the FQM Excellence Award, there is a difference. If you want to win the award, you don't want to show any weaknesses as an organization. And sometimes that's a failing. And at certain points within organizations and the journey, we need to understand what's going on. And if we have very, very robust processes inside the organization that help us understand that big picture, and we do have a very clear view of our strengths and the inherent weaknesses, the opportunities, the places where we need to drive that improvement. That's a part of the confidence that we need to have, not just for the leaders of the organization, but to be able to communicate with the stakeholders. But it's always good, I feel, to pull in that external view and get that understanding and learning. And one of the things we have to be very careful of within any award process is creating those behaviors, because naturally as human beings, we are a competitive bunch, generally speaking. We need to make sure that that desire to win does not prevent the learning, that people are not hiding things. Because if people are hiding things from within the organization and we do not really understand, we think that we have a strength when actually there is an inherent weakness. When we hit a moment of stress, such as the COVID crisis, where we think we've got a strength, we actually have a weakness that's been papered over. And as soon as we put that under stress, cracks appear, and the organization isn't able to flex, adjust to the stress that it's being put under, and we get breakages. So we need to make sure within the organization, and however we create that in terms of the external assessments, that we do have an honest culture that helps us really understand genuinely where our strengths are and where our weaknesses are, so that we can take appropriate actions and decisions. And there will always be areas in an organization that are not as strong as other areas. That's just one of the compromises. We do not have an infinite amount of time, resources, and money to be able to make sure that everything is utterly fantastic. It's just not realistic. We need to understand where we need to have those strengths. Where is it in terms of the ecosystem that we work in that we need to be not just excellent, but the best? Where are those key differentiators? And that will mean that we make compromises and we need to understand what are those compromises. And that's part of being an excellent organization. Because being an excellent organization isn't about being excellent at everything. It's about understanding what makes you exceptional and where you need to be excellent to achieve your vision, so that you can actively demonstrate you're not wasting resources. Which brings us on to the assessment cycle that you're entering, the fantastic 19th cycle of the SKEA award process. The SKEA categories split it down into silver, gold, and diamond. So scoring over 350 points is silver, scoring over 450 points is gold, scoring over 550 points is diamond. And obviously, you guys being Dewa, you're going to be very, very happy if you get silver. I'm hoping everyone is awake and laughing at that point. So the Diamond organization is an excellent organization that it shows improvement. It's a way of life within that organization. It's part of the DNA. As soon as you walk in, you feel the energy from the employees. They're empowered, they're engaged, they're positive ambassadors for the brand. They really drive this forward. As when you walk into a 500 plus organization, you can really feel a difference. There's a buzz within the organization, a positive buzz, obviously. They're considered the industry benchmark. They're able to show sustained, excellent results over a period of time. Now, obviously, within Dewa, you have achieved, you've won the European Excellence Award. Sorry, the EFQM Excellence Award. I do apologize. But one of the things that we've seen over the years then is organizations have won it and their performance drops off for a number of different reasons. It could be that there's been a new entrance into the market. So one of the big issues, the most famous ones, was Nokia in the 90s, 2000s, won the EFQM award and then got absolutely wiped out when someone came up with something called the iPhone. And they just didn't respond to it. It wasn't so much that they didn't see it coming, because Nokia actually were already working on touchscreen technology and did have that within their R&D, but it had been deprioritized because they just didn't think that that was going to work. So, and then the other thing that we see is once organizations win, they take their foot off the gas. You know, job done, brilliant. Let's go and have a cup of tea. And that's one of the things, obviously, that you guys have to make sure doesn't happen. You have to maintain that momentum, because as soon as you've reached that level of excellence, you know, and my understanding is that you guys were well over 700 points. If you stop moving forward, you effectively move backwards. The way that excellence works, as soon as someone starts seeing things, there is that learning loop. People are looking at what you're doing, what it is that makes you different. And instead of just copying what's going on, people will be looking at, okay, so how can we do that better? And if you stand still, people will overtake you. If you just stay where you are at the given time, at the level that you reach to achieve that the award level, you are going to get overtaken. And actually, if you don't do anything between assessments, your score goes down. And that's what we talk about in terms of the excellence journey. So you don't want to wait until you've had an accident to visit the garage. You don't want to wait until your beautiful Porsche is mashed up. To make sure it's performing at its best, most of us will take our car in for a regular service. At the minimum, we might even look at things like getting the engine tuned, changing suspension settings, looking at the different tire options so we can optimize the performance. But if we are going to get improvement, we need to do something. And that's the key thing with the excellence assessments. If we want to improve, we have to learn and implement improvements. And when we're setting up the assessment process, that's something that we need to be aware of. Now, in terms of this journey to excellence and moving forward, the assessments can be external, so using SKEA, or they can be internal or self-assessments. Doesn't really matter how it's done. The assessments need to, though, give you the insights that help you to understand your position against where it is that you want to be. And the improvements that have been identified then need to be prioritized. And if you agree that it's a priority, they obviously then need to be implemented. They need to be put into action to drive us forward. And this is the key thing in terms of the steps on that journey. It's getting those insights, getting that learning, getting that understanding. Now, one of the key things that I used to do with my teams during the assessment process was talk to people about what was happening in the assessment process. Because I know I've seen this done in many organizations where what they are trying to do is preempt the issues that the assessors are looking at and change the presentation materials for the next person or cover any holes that they think that the assessors have done. I don't think that that really works. And it's, yeah, philosophically speaking, it's not really where I want to go. What I was really looking for and trying to capture, and this is something that quite often happens to me, is when you're having the discussion with the assessors, if it's a good assessment, just the questions that they're asking you and the way that they are asking those questions makes you think about things from a different perspective. Because quite often I was finding that the assessors were asking me questions from a viewpoint that was completely different to anyone within the organization, which is one of the beauties of having people who aren't from your industry. Because in any industry, there's just some assumptions on the way that things are done. That's just the way it's always been, and no one challenges those assumptions. And in some cases, you can say, okay, for regulatory reasons, we have to do it that way. That's, you know, when there is legislation in place that means that we have to follow this process, and that's fine. In a really good assessment, what I was finding was during those discussions, it's making me think about things in terms of the answers. Now, whether I would actually share these insights with the assessors or not is a judgment call, but you're actually thinking about things and you're starting to think about, actually, is there another way of doing these things? So when we were going through that assessment process, I was making sure that we captured that learning where people had thought about things as a result of, or even afterwards, you know, the I wish I had said, or I, you know, kind of things. Capturing that learning immediately while it's still fresh, while people are still engaged, and looking at how can we use that to help drive us forward. And that alternative perspective, you would never see that coming up in the assessment report, in the feedback report. But for us, that learning was so important because it was that creative moment. And that's always the key about agility and timeliness. It's capturing the spark as the spark happens, because it's only there for a couple of seconds, and it's capturing that creative energy. And that's one of the key things to think about in terms of how you're doing these things, is how do you capture that learning, that new insight, that spark of energy actually at the point that it's happening. So I'm just looking at the time, and we're coming up to when we said we would have the prayer break. So I've still got 7 minutes according to my clock. And we're running on my clock because you're all on mute and I'm the only one who can speak. So we have this slide, and then we will pause and take the break. So as we start to enter what we're calling the new normal, and if you look at this photograph, apparently the new normal is happening right now just outside our lane. So as we move into this new normal, what are the key challenges that we need to address? Now, I'm sad to say I haven't had the privilege to visit Dewa. So I'm going to have to focus on some specifics on my experience within the UAE in general. So hopefully some of this will be relevant to you. If you have managed to address some of these issues effectively, then you have some capital to trade with other organizations who are still struggling with these things. So, breaking silos. I see a lot of people, teams and departments working in isolation, especially when it comes to things like new initiatives. And things like not only the EFQM model, but also the GEM model within the government area is actually reinforcing some of this, because people start looking at things instead of taking that holistic view and looking at strategic themes, excuse me. Instead of looking at how things are joined together, they're looking at each of those little boxes in isolation. And that encourages this silo thinking. And I've seen many examples of new linked, despite significant investment being made, because they're not integrated within the actual day-to-day business, within the operations. They're seen as separate entities in themselves, goals in their own right. If we can effectively break those silos, if we can get things working together, it makes us more efficient, it makes us more effective as an organization, and it delivers our strategic goals if we're all working towards the same common goals. Talking about new initiatives, innovation. Everyone in the UAE talks about innovation. And again, I'm seeing huge amounts of investments being made, but return on investment is not a big issue, and it's definitely not being realized. Some cases, it's not even being tracked. And what I tend to see, excuse me, what I tend to see more often than not is what we'd call innovation for the sake of innovation. Things that look good, look flashy, but don't actually add any value. I see an over-reliance in terms of innovation on technology. I see things getting more complicated, especially systems and interfaces and processes, where they become increasingly complex, whereas from most people's perspective, innovation should be making things easier, not harder. So that's one of the key areas to focus on, is innovation that truly adds value to the stakeholders. Makes things easier, makes it easier to do business, makes people's lives easier. Another issue that we come up against is the competitive culture. And competition can be a good thing, but when it's internal, we're looking at internal competition between individuals, teams, and departments within the same organization, it can be a very, very bad thing. People should be working together as a team, working towards the same goals. And within the UAE generally, there is naturally a very, very competitive culture. One of the focuses for organizations is to make sure that that competitive nature is directed outside the organization to give you an edge and help you move forward and achieve that competitive advantage, rather than competition within inside the organization, which has negative impacts, actually reduces your efficiency and your effectiveness. So that's one of the things that needs to be worked out for. One of the final things I'm going to touch on is there tends to be a focus on making things look better rather than actually making things better. I still see a lot of window dressing, things that flashy presentations, things that look really, really good on the surface, but when you poke them, when you look closer, they don't really do the job that they need to do. And as leaders, as I've said earlier on, leaders need to be aware of an organization's strengths and its weaknesses. That window dressing can be used to paper over cracks, and that can be a very, very dangerous thing. If we as leaders don't know what's going wrong, then we can't fix it. And the problem, as I said before, is if you have those systematic weaknesses that you're not aware of when you're put under stress, such as the COVID pandemic, but let's face it, the COVID pandemic we are riding through at the moment. The next stressful crisis we hit will look completely different to COVID. But again, organizations are going to need to rise to those challenges. And whether that's a sudden fall in the oil price, some other major disruption within an industry, it's not a good time to find out that what you think is an organizational strength is actually your Achilles heel. And that's why internally we need to have that culture of openness and honesty to make sure that we are as good as we think that we are. I'm going to leave it there and our break is scheduled for 15 minutes. So according to my clock, it's 12:31. The noise that you heard in the background was my reminder going off telling me that. So Mohammed, 15 minutes break, yeah?
Yeah, Matt. Thank you very much, Matt, for the wonderful first session. The break is going to be for 15 minutes. Before we go for the break, I would like to just add on here, there is one update with regards to the SKEA categories, where Matt already touched upon. We have silver, gold, and diamond category. But sorry, Matt, I did not update you regarding the new category, which has been recently approved by the SKEA board, which we are going to introduce from this cycle. It's going to be a elite category, which is reserved for those world-class organizations, whether be it local, regional, or global, who boost a best-in-class level in all aspects of their operations and practices, and who previously actually won international awards, both with scores higher than 650. So such organizations, SKEA jury expects to see world-class levels of performance in all aspects of business with clear example of globally leading practices and benchmarks. So this is the only update I would like to give with regards to the SKEA categories. This new elite category, which will be like, companies who are going to score 650 and plus, they will be recognized with this category. So thank you very much for joining in for the first session. So let us go for a break, for the prayer break. We will have a 15 minutes. We'll come back sharp 12:45. We will start. Thank you very much. See you back soon. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the second session. We are going to start in a moment. This session going to last for 1 hour. We will try to finish by 1:45, and then we will open the floor for the questions. In the meantime, you can also share your questions through chat box and Q&A box. And also at the end, upon request, we will also open the mic for you to ask questions. So, Matt, would you please take over?
Yep. Thank you, and welcome back. So, this is working. It's working. Okay. So the SKEA process. Applicants have to register and prepare their submission, and my understanding is that they will have already registered. So there we go through. In parallel to that, SKEA will be selecting and training assessors. And I think that's an opportunity for some of you guys to maybe get involved in terms of assessing. I think when I was actively involved in preparing award submissions and in the process, I used to act as an assessor. I was a EFQM assessment team leader for 10 years. The amount of learning and personal development that I got from being an assessor, from working with that team of professionals from all over the range of different sectors, and plus going in and looking at other organizations and how they were approaching things, the amount of learning I was able to take back, especially when I was working at RICO, and bring back into the organization, it was incredible. And I was always known within RICO as an ideas person, and it wasn't particularly true. Part of ideas and innovation, what they say, is 80% isn't actually a brand new idea. It's taking something from a different sector and implementing it into yours. So I could always see, no matter what level the organization I went into, I could always learn something from them, from what they were doing, or sometimes even what they weren't doing, and see how that could help us in RICO make the organization stronger, better, give me insights into why some of the things weren't working that we thought were going to be working. So obviously, once you're registered and the applicants are, sorry, the assessors are trained rather than the applicants, you get an assessor team allocated to plan and conduct the site visit. They then go on to prepare the feedback reports. Once all of those feedback reports are done, and the deadline for the assessments taking place this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi,
hear
Matt.
you and see your mask.
Yes, I was hearing you and enjoying every minute of it. It was extremely powerful and well presented. Thank you very much for that, and extremely well received also at this end here in Diwa. I think whatever is remaining, you will just sort of walk through it, and we'll try and give them time to ask any questions, if any.
Absolutely.
That discrepancy was addressed by Mohammed, but it's also worth you also mentioning it. That elite category was recently set up by the higher committee in order to accommodate people like DEWA and other world-class organizations who can score 700 plus with these high benchmarks and so on. So it's a little bit higher than the diamond, which is at 550.
Yeah, so and that's new for the 19th cycle. So you have the elite category, which is 700 plus. Yeah,
exactly. And it's going to be very tough. You need to tell them that it's not easy. It's very tough to be elite, as expected.
As it should be. But
yeah,
but I think they should be able to rise to that challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, and you as a juror, you'll make sure that they don't make it.
I think I have a reputation for being rather firm but fair in the jury. And,
Okay.
and so, I mean, certainly one of the jobs when the assessors come back in, one of the jobs for the jury that we're looking at is making sure so that we have confidence that they have asked the right questions and that the feedback they are giving us is robust and reliable, and it's a fair reflection of the organization, both in terms of the strengths and the improvements that they're putting forward.
Yeah, and of course the condition which applies to them in this case, they needed to have won an international award like the FKM or Baldrige or Deming, so they have to have once scored 700 at an international level to be able to qualify for the elite.
Yeah, I mean, I'll come back to the timelines and key dates in a second, but those site visits will be conducted in December, maybe the early part of January. And the feedback reports have to be finished by the end of January, so 31st of January in terms of the key dates. Okay, right. So let's look at from the perspective of the applicants, the submission document and what needs to go into it. Now, the submission document is the same as the EFQM
That's right.
format.
Exactly the same. No change at all.
Yeah.
Enable them up. We were tolerant, in fact. In previous years, we were also tolerant to the 75-page, but since last year, we encourage everyone to use the enable map, which was a lot easier for their sisters.
Yeah, and I'll come on to it in a second. The enabler map was something that I massively championed. I mean, we used it extensively when I was at RICO, not only for when we were applying for assessments or recognition or awards. We used those documents to help train new people coming into the organization, because it was the only document that we had that had everything that happened in the organization. We had a whole suite of those different documents, from one for each of the sales companies, and there were 23 different country-based sales companies within RICO at the time. But we also had the overall one for the whole of RICO Europe, and that was used as part of the induction. And we actually got to the point where every year we would have to produce that document regardless of whether we were going for recognition or not, because the board were actually using it in the review process, the budget review process, to understand the different pieces and coordinate the different activities that were going on. So if you have something like an enabler map document, it does provide very good insight for your own leadership team in terms of what's happening within the organization, what's working, where are these initiatives. And when people are coming back in and asking for budget for things, they were starting to get questioned, but wait a minute, the submission document says we already have that. So what do you need the money for? And so it would help direct those conversations. So the initial part of that document is what we call the key information that gives you the opportunity to explain what it is that the organization, what's the core purpose of the organization, what are the strategic priorities. Give information about the operating environment as you see it, the organizational structure, who the key stakeholder groups are. Really give that focus on this is who we are and this is what we are trying to achieve. Then move into the enabler map section, and the enabler map section is always structured around those five the five enabling criteria. So leadership, strategy, people, partners and resources, and processes, products and services. And it gives you that structure around what you can do. Now, quite often for each of those at the beginning, we had one page for each of those five sections that described the key issues, the key challenges, the strategic objectives for that specific criteria before going into the detail on the enabler map, and that can be quite a useful tool for showing, nice pictures and diagrams, because one of the issues with the enabler map that people were initially resistant about was it was very text heavy. So you can use that initial section to show things like the process for setting objectives, or the organizational structure, or the flow of how you take something from a new product or service from conceptual level through to delivery. So those sort of aspects we could use on that first page, but keeping it tight. So I mean, we had everything that happened in Rico Europe, which was an organization of 15,000 people working in 23 different countries, was described in a 36-page document. So it can be very concise and very focused, and that's one of the key bits. And then obviously the results sections, and generally the results sections we would keep to one page per sub-criterion. So you've obviously got the customer results, for example, splits down into 2 sub-criteria. All of the 4 result areas split down into 4. We would have 8 graphs with commentary underneath to explain how these link back to the approaches that we've been talking about in the enablers. That then restricts the amount of space that you have there to really focus on the key results. So, I mean, one of the things I have, as was mentioned at the start, I've been doing quite a lot of work with the various different government bodies who are now using the GEM or 4G version of the model. One of the things we're seeing with those submissions is there are literally thousands of KPIs and thousands of capabilities being put into these documents, and there is nothing to indicate what's the most important ones, which causes the assessors a problem and actually impacts their view of the organization in terms of how clear the organization is about what's important to it and the strategy of it. So actually limiting yourselves to the number of results means that you have to very carefully select the results, not based on performance, but based on how relevant they are to the achievement of the strategic goals and the approaches you've talked about. Because one of the key factors in the radar scoring system is about the relevance of the results. And if the results are not relevant to what you're talking about and your key strategic objectives, then you score down. It doesn't matter how good the results are. If they're not relevant, it doesn't matter. So, for example, you can put in a trend of how many cars are sitting in your car park. Unless you're actually in the business of running a car park, that is not a relevant measure. And you might have a fantastic trend on it, and you might always hit your target. And in terms of benchmarks, you might have more cars in your car park than anybody else. But if that's not important to your business, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And that's one of the aspects that you would need to look at in terms of putting the submission document together. So in terms of what makes a good submission document, from my perspective, less is more. Excellent organizations are really clear about what's important to them. They have that clear strategic focus, and the content of the submission document reflects that. It really hones down to the things that really, really matter. Now, during the site visit, as people ask questions, you can pull in extra results, whether they're key performance indicators or just performance indicators, operational measures, things that you use. You can use those to demonstrate that learning loop in the radar. So how you understand how efficiently and effectively the approach is working, how you understand how the deployment of that approach is going, whether it's fully rolled out or whether it's fully active in all areas. Those details you can hold back for the assessment, keeping the submission document focused on the really important things shows a clear level of maturity and understanding. When we're talking about benchmarks and things, the benchmarks are really important to help put performance in perspective. So, and the perspective being the ecosystems that you operate in. Again, we see people cherry picking benchmarks that just make them look good, but don't actually relate back to their statement and their vision. So if someone has said we want to be world class, then we would expect as assessors the benchmarks to be the world class organization, to be the best in the world, not switching between different organizations. Because as soon as you see different organizations being used, unless you can then say we have picked that organization because in that area they are the best, it just looks like you're cherry picking someone to make you look good. And as we move into this cycle with the aftermath of COVID and the pandemic, that benchmarking is going to be much, much more important to put things in the context, because it's likely that in a number of areas we're going to see drops in performance levels. So your trend is going to have a nice downward turn at the end because of COVID crisis. Now, benchmarks help put that in context, because if you're an agile organization, if you're a truly excellent organization, you can still have had a drop, but because of the prompt actions that you took, that drop is nowhere near as significant as others experienced within your ecosystem. And that's really why we want the benchmarks, is to understand that perspective, to put things in perspective, because not everything goes perfectly. And COVID is a great example of that, because everyone's had challenges to deal with. The difference is going to be with the excellent organizations is that they've been able to reduce the impact, sometimes negate the impact, but certainly reduce it compared to others, and recover faster. So you need that clear focus to show what really matters to you as an organization. The submission document should be easy to understand how the different pieces fit together. How does this all work to help us achieve those strategic goals? As a minimum, the information needs to be clear, accurate, and reliable. As soon as people start seeing things in the document which don't look the same as when you get into the organization, it starts alarm bells ringing. I remember being in an organization and we were doing the assessment, and it was becoming increasingly clear that the document did not accurately reflect the organization. And in one of the sessions at the end of the day, I showed someone the submission document that we were working from, and they said, "This organization looks brilliant. I wish I worked in it." And you're like, but this is supposed to be your organization, and it clearly wasn't. Someone had just written a glowing view of what they thought was happening, not what was really happening on the ground. And one of the other key things is avoiding jargon, or where it's difficult to avoid jargon. And we used to have this in RICO all the time. We would put a page at the end, which was the jargon buster. So the thing that you always hear in RICO is MFP, MFP, MFP. And MFP stands for a multifunction product, which to a normal person means one of those copiers that sits in the room on each floor, and it's capable of doing multi-tasks. So a multifunction product can scan, it can scan straight to email, it can produce copies, it can do a variety of different tasks. But we would just always talk about MFPs, and no one would know what we were talking about, because it's a term that's only used in the industry. So using that a page towards the back as the jargon buster really helped the assessors understand what was going on. And for us, it helps write the document, because we do want to write MFP, because it's much easier to write MFP than every time write multi-product, for example. Yeah. Now, one of the ways to get that focus is what I was talking about earlier with mapping the strategic goals across the model. This can help you understand what needs to go in the submission document, but perhaps more importantly, what you don't put in the submission document, what you can leave out. This helps get that focus on the submission document, helps keep it focused on what really matters. And you use the column in the enabler map, the one that's about links between approaches. That gives you a way of communicating these different arrows to show the flow. So you don't need to put everything that's linked in. What you do is you start the leadership box and you build that chain, you build that flow using the links box so assessors can follow it forwards and backwards to understand how these different approaches and the different criterion fit together. So that's one way of doing it. Another method that I've used in the past is to write the submission documents based on fundamental concepts. So you pull together a group of experts from across the organization for each of the concepts. Then you document those into the enabler map to work out what are the key approaches that we have that help us within this fundamental concept. I mean, the traditional way of writing submission documents was always you would assign ownership of one of the boxes. So like leadership, you would give that to someone and they would write the leadership bit, and then someone else would be writing strategy, and someone else, normally the HR department, would be writing the people bit. In some ways, your HR department are the worst people to talk about the people section, because most of what happens in terms of managing people and developing people does not happen in the HR department. It happens in the line. So it's how do we capture that information? And if you write it based on those boxes, what you tend to find is you'll get duplication or you'll get bits missed out. So the person who's writing strategy will assume that whoever is writing the leadership bit will cover this bit so they don't go into it. Or they both talk about it, but they talk about it in completely different ways. And so you either have a massive editing job afterwards to do that, or you end up, if you haven't done that editing job, a document that's confused, it's duplicating, it's missing bits. So writing it by concept and writing the concepts across the boxes helps ensure that you build in the linkages as you're going through this. There's also an added benefit in terms of breaking down the silos, because you're talking through this and because you've got all the people in the room, you've got people from different departments talking about what they're working on. And because then you've got the other people who are relevant to this topic in there, they are listening and understanding. And at the end of this, they work out how they can work more effectively together to make sure these things really do link up to achieve those common goals. So writing it by fundamental concept is something, I mean, we started doing that when I was at Rico, and then when I went to EFQM, I helped Grundfos and Volvo and a bunch of other people pull together their information for submissions, whether it was for internal assessment or external assessment. And the tool that we generally used, which being EFQM members, you can access this. There's two different matrices. There's one called the Business Excellence Matrix, and there's one called the EFQM Assessment Matrix. They work on the same principle. They kind of give you a repository which will produce an enabler map. The difference between them is the Business Excellence Matrix has scope for writing 50 enablers. The Business Excellence Matrix, off the top of my head, is about 75, 80, something like that. But it means that you can get all the information into a single document. It's an Excel spreadsheet, actually, and it can contain the enablers and the results. And then when you come to update the results, when you get to the end of the year, you just add in the extra level of results. And again, within Rico, with the management systems that we had, this was the only place that all of that information was collated and put together in a single place. And one of the things that you can do, each of the different elements within the matrix is assigned to one of the fundamental concepts. So basically, if you're looking at writing the document by fundamental concept, you just filter on whichever concept you're looking at. And then you focus in on, and it will automatically push those different elements into the correct criterion and sub-criterion. So it's a very efficient way of capturing the information and pulling it together. Plus, you've got the benefit of bringing everyone together in the group and sharing that knowledge and experience. In terms of the feedback report that you'll get, obviously, SKEA highly trained assessors. The document is split down into sections, so you get an executive summary at the start, which gives a short overview of the key findings from the holistic viewpoint, aimed specifically at the leadership team. Now, with the SKEA feedback report, unlike the FQM one, the FQM one will group things under the fundamental concepts. The SKEA one will focus on the key strategic themes that have been identified, and those will be discussed in the preparation for the site visit. So you'll get the feedback on those strategic themes. So it's designed to give leaders very short, concise, punchy information on where the assessment team have identified the key strengths of the organization and where they think the biggest potential for improvement is. And of course, you then get the detail in terms of the strengths, areas for improvement, and an overall scoring profile for the organization. The detailed feedback is done at sub-criterion level. And that's really then for line managers, the people who are responsible for the day-to-day activities, to look at that in more detail. But in terms of prioritizing the improvements, we've always looked at prioritizing at the top level, so by the strategic themes. Because what tends to happen is if the document's been put together well, if you address one of the issues at a strategic theme level, at the summary level, you'll actually take out 5 or 6 smaller areas for improvement that are sitting in the detailed feedback report. And it's understanding how those bits fit together. And that's where what makes a good feedback report. Deja vu, exactly the same list as what makes a good submission document. That also applies to a feedback report. It needs to be concise, it needs to be easy for the reader to understand, and it needs to focus on what's really important for the applicant. The information obviously needs to be clear, accurate, and reliable if it's going to inform the decision-making processes. Leaders need to have confidence that this is a fair and accurate representation of their organization. And that's part of the role of the jury that we were talking about, is to really challenge the assessors and make sure that they can back up the statements, both in terms of the strengths and the improvements. Because go back to what I was talking about before the break, you really don't want, as an organization, to think that you have a strength and then at a time of stress find out that what you thought was that strength is actually a weakness. There's a systematic failure in there, because when things are put under stress, those systematic failures get exposed. A good feedback report makes the priorities clear, not just the what, but the why. It shouldn't use technical jargon, and it shouldn't be prescriptive, but it should give a clear indication of why the assessment team think that improvement area is a priority, what it's going to enable the organization to do, or what risk it's going to help them to manage and mitigate. So between now and the end of October, the deadline for getting for registration was the 31st of October, or is the 31st of October. that's not really relevant for you because you have already registered. The key date that you need to work to now is the 30th of November, which is the deadline for your final submission, not the draft submission, the final submission. So everything needs to be ready and finalized by the 30th of November. And in parallel for that, the assessor training and selections going on, as I mentioned before, between September and November. The site visits themselves will be taking place in December and January. And those dates will be agreed with the assessor team once they're assigned to you and they've gone through your submission document and understood what they see as your strategic priorities. So you can then look at planning the site visit, completing the assessments. They have to be done January at the latest because the submission, the final feedback reports need to be completed and back in before the jury meeting. The jury meeting takes place in early February. So, and at that point, the jury will be going through and making recommendations on adjustments to the feedback report. So whoever your assessment team leader is will really need to have that draft feedback report ready pretty much at the end of the site visits, at the end of January. And in terms of date for the diary, the awards ceremony itself is currently planned on either the 23rd or 24th of February. Last I heard, it hadn't been finalized, but that's the dates that are being worked to. So yes, make sure that that's in your diary so that you can attend. And the final feedback reports are then distributed after that, so they'll be probably being circulated early April once they've been finalized and all the quality checks have been done to make sure that you are getting as good a feedback report as is humanly possible. So in terms of how SKEA can help you, as has been mentioned, SKEA is the national partner of EFQM, and so are able to provide a whole range of training, assessment, and recognition processes. There's also the sharing, the best practices, sharing examples of good practice that have been identified from the awards process, from thinking that's been going on. There's a whole series of webinars that have been going on as well during the COVID crisis, when we obviously can't do physical meetings, on a range of different topics. So if you're not aware of that, visit the website so you can pick up more information on that. But in terms of my presentation, that's all I have to say. So I'm gonna open it up to the question and answers. So if you do have a question, you can stick it on the chat so that we can pick it up. We might be able to open microphones, but we'll see how that whole process works. But
thank you very
much
indeed, Matt, for this extremely exciting and thought-provoking, deep, insighted session. I think it's always assuring to speak to the primary author of a document to tell you more about its insights and hurdles. So I think all the audience will agree it's been extremely helpful and expository in order to go through all that. We will obviously be giving the floor for our colleagues and to ask the questions. But going back to the rectification, I think DIWA is going for the elite category, and we feel that we've got all the ingredients necessary to achieve it, hopefully. And we look forward for the assessment, and the team is quite ready to go this hurdle. So over to Muhammad and the questions and answers. Thank you once again, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for the wonderful session, informative session. Thank you, Prof. We have here one question, and if anybody would like to come over mic and put across your questions, you just write down your name over here in the chat box so that I can unmute your mic. So there is one question here from Lala Mariam. She is asking if SKEA will use EFQM 2020 model. It's not clear going forward, maybe in the future. This is the question. Professor Hadi? Would you like to
Yeah,
take
I
this?
think the decision has not been finalized by the higher committee, but nevertheless, the EFCAM 2020 model will be one of the inputs into whatever SKEA is going to develop in the next cycle, the 20th cycle. So for the moment, it is still 2013, and we will be updating the applicants before the beginning of the new cycle.
Thank you very much for the answer. Thank you very much, Lala, for asking the question. Any further questions? Any request for the mic opening? Just write down your name in the chat box. If you would like to ask any question over mic, I will open the mic. No questions coming through. One second here. One more. I think one question is asked here in the Q&A. Just a second. Q&A.
Hello.
Fatima Al-Asari, she's asking, please, can you send manual to our email if possible? Sure, we will do that. So any questions?
I think things seems to be crystal clear, Matt.
Yeah. It is crystal clear. Most of the topics have been covered precisely by Matt. And here, Mohammed Bishad wants to ask a question. Okay. Mohammed Bishad. Okay, I'm just going to open the mic for Mohammed Bishad. Just hold on a second. Mohammed Bishad. Just a moment, I'm finding his name. Mohammed Bishad. This is your registered name, Mohammed Bishad? Okay, here I go. 1 second. Yeah, here you go, Mohammed Bishad. You can ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, wa alaikum salam. Go ahead.
Hi, brother. How are
Ask
you?
your question.
Can you send for us the presentation, please, so we can
Sure,
go
we
through
will.
it? That's my question. That's okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's a very nice, easy question as well.
There is a question from Dr.
Any
Farhan.
question? Yeah.
There's one from Dr. Farhan. If you please hand the microphone.
Sure. Dr. Farhan, I'm finding his name. 1 second. Dr. Farhan, here you go. Yes, Dr. Farhan. You can ask your question.
My question is, it's about the, actually it's very clear from your side, everything about the presentation, about the concepts, about the criteria, and even the radar. So and you make it very simple in a good way. But thank you very much, first of all. My question is, as you see, this model 2013, it was last for 10 years or more than 10 years. Because in 2013 it's the same as 2010, and before, the changes are not that big changes, even especially in the criteria. So, but when we are talking about the new model of 2020, we have a big change. How do you think, or what do you think the best way to transit from the 2013 to 2020 model? What the roadmap that we need to take, and what the actions that we need to take to transit to the new model?
Okay. I'll start off on a defensive foot, and then look at moving forward. I think actually the changes between the 2010 and the 2013 model were actually quite significant. They were subtle, but they were significant. And actually, I mean, one of the reasons behind it was with the 2010 one. There was still quite a lot of struggle in terms of moving away from the old ISO 9000 way of thinking to the need for increased flexibility and agility. So while the kind of structure didn't change, the actual changes within and certainly within the concepts and the integration of the concepts were quite significant in terms of the way it worked. But having said that, in terms of transitioning towards the 2020 model, I think one of the key things in terms of moving forward now that would help is if you do use something like the assessment matrix to build your enabler map, so that the information is all captured in something like an Excel spreadsheet. Very, very easy. I've done this before when we did the transition from the 2003 model to the 2010 model. It makes it much easier to start mapping across the approaches, the existing approaches that you have and that documentation. So you don't have to start again from scratch. You can just either cut and paste or just a case of realigning things. And once you've done that alignment process, it's then quite easy to work out where the gaps are. So where there's been new concepts brought into the criteria and new details that are looking for, it's quite easy when you're working through that to go, hang on a second, we haven't got an approach documented that really fits that. Now, do we really have a hole in the organization? Is this something we are just not doing? Or what is the approach that we need to document to make sure that we understand how that's being covered? So managing that transition, using this opportunity now as you create that SKEA document, the document for this cycle, capture it in a way that will enable you to do that mapping exercise and work out whether things that's going to make, in terms of the documentation, the transition moving over much easier, and it should highlight where you think you've got gaps between what's currently happening and what's highlighted in the 2020 version of the model. That makes sense?
Okay, man. Thank you very much. I have another question. Can I ask it now or?
Sure, go ahead. Sure.
My question is about the concepts actually. When we talk about the concepts and we go to the criteria, sometimes we find the alignment that already done actually by FKM before, that there is the alignment between the criteria and the concepts. Do you think in the mature organization, should they go to the detailed criteria, or it's enough for them just to see the concepts and analyze the concept and try to implement the concept as a concept, or they should have also at the same time see the criteria and requirements and to implement them? So I will not ignore, of course, we will not ignore the radar, but I mean, my question is should I focus on the concepts or should I focus on the criteria, or both together? And if they are both together, I will go to more details. And this is what I mean.
Yeah. When I was working with the more mature members in the FQM, we tended to focus much more on the concepts and understanding how their strategic themes then mapped across the criteria. I mean, the detail that's in the sub-criterion of the FQM model, and that's the same in the new version as well. They're called guidance points because that's what they're there for. They're guidance. In the 2013 model, we were very, very deliberate that the bullet points should be distributed across the different criteria and appear exactly word for word the same in the concepts as they did in the criteria, because one of the problems that we had with the 2003 version of the model was the concepts appeared to be different to the criteria, and in some cases the bullet points in the concepts were actually contradictory to the guidance points that were in the criteria. And actually, if you go back and understand what was going on, there was politics going on in EFQM. I hate to suggest that EFQM has politics going on, but generally that's the case. And what happened was there was two different groups of people in development who went off in different directions. So one of them wanted just to do an assessment based on fundamental concepts and define that group of fundamental concepts and move away completely from the 9-box model, whereas another group wanted to update the 9-box model, and EFQM being EFQM, instead of bringing the two groups together and getting a solution, just publish both of them in the same book. So you actually ended up with effectively two different ways of looking at excellence. So one of the fixes that we had to do in the 2010 version was get that alignment between the concepts and the criteria. But because of the time pressure and various other, it wasn't perfect in 2010, but in the 2013 one, it was absolutely word for word. And we made sure, I mean, it's part of the cross checks, is we start by writing the concepts and then map those across the criterion and work out where we need to make changes to the actual structure of the sub-criterion within the framework itself. And if you have a sub-criterion that doesn't have an element from the fundamental concepts in, you've got a problem. Either there's something missing in your fundamental concepts, or that's a redundant criteria. And that was the discussion that we were having. So if you just purely focus on the fundamental concepts and work out how those are relevant to you and strategically, I don't think you need to go into the detail of the sub-criterion. I know some assessors still kind of try and use that as a checklist, but certainly that's not in the way that the assessors are being trained. We brief them deliberately that those are guidance points and you shouldn't look for everything. And certainly if I see something in the feedback report that looks like they're using it as a checklist, so which the giveaway is an area for improvement that says something like not much evidence of bullet point number 4 in 4.1, then I will absolutely hammer them. Because unless you can put that in context of the organization, it's completely irrelevant feedback. Unless that the fact that that is not happening in the organization is preventing the organization from achieving their full potential, or preventing them from mitigating a risk, or preventing them from speedily grasping a new opportunity, then it's completely irrelevant. So from my perspective, focusing on the fundamental concepts is a much better way of doing it. And actually, one of the advantages of the 2013 over 2010 was you can actually calculate a score, a maturity score, based on the scoring, the profile that you get in the assessment feedback report, but you can convert that into a maturity against the concepts. And that was the bit that we were using with the really advanced Bosch organizations. Certainly, we would sit down and work that through so that they could focus on, well, hang on a second, we've said that sustainability is a key focus for us, but we're not, when we actually look at that concept, we are not scoring as well as we would like in that area. So where do we need to prioritize things? So that's some of the changes within the 2013 model were quite subtle, but added a lot of power. And things, I mean, the scorecard in the 2010 version was broken. I'll be completely honest about it. The radar version in the 2010 was, and it was basically because the team that was working on it, we ran out of time. And we didn't have enough we still had those differences between the people who wanted a very sort of ISO hard, detailed approach and a more soft approach. So the biggest, the most obvious improvement when you look at it is the radar scorecard in the 2013 is massively simplified, but is actually much better. It reduces a lot of the issues that you get when you're trying to do things. I mean, as I said, less is more. People get hung up on the words that were in the matrix, and actually removing the words from the matrix and just focusing on, okay, so how good, how effectively can they demonstrate this, made a massive change, both to the scoring process, because it made it simpler and made the assessors focus more than not on the score, but on making sure that the feedback statements they were giving added value. And that was one of my key objectives, was getting the feedback statements so that we didn't have stupid things like no evidence of X or limited benchmarking, which we used to see all the time. It was actually to get them to focus on writing value-adding statements that made sense to the leadership team and added, were clear for them, rather than focusing on, scoring accuracy down to 0.2% of a variable, which is pointless. I mean, when you get the scoring band, it's between, it's in 50 points. So arguing about 1 point or 2 points adds no value to anyone. Yeah. So a short answer would be I'd focus on the concepts. They are fundamental to excellence, and a mature organization, it's understanding those concepts, understanding how that fits within your organization, and understanding and coordinating the actions of the different departments to make sure it's as efficient and effective as possible on achieving the strategic goals.
Okay, man. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammad Farhan, for your question, and Matt for your detailed reply. Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to question? Anybody else? Okay, here. Amal would like to ask whether this session is going to repeat. I'm not sure, Amal, about that. When it's going to be, you will be informed. And Iman Al-Hiyari, she would like to ask, how long is the site visit? Matt, would you like to take this question? How long?
No,
typically, please.
No, I said no. I don't want to answer that question. Okay, with this SKEA process, I might get it wrong, because you have a slightly different selection to.
Can I answer this question? Yeah. The average SKEA site visit is 2 days, but depending on the level of complexes and the operations, it might go up to 3. So this is just a straightforward answer to that. Yeah. It's 2 to 3 days.
Depending, usually it depends on the scope of the application and the size of the organization. So typically, as Professor said, it would be 2 to 3 days. In case of Deva, it would be 2 to 3 days you can consider. Thank you, Iman, for that. And we have Lalla Mariam again. She's asking a question. Will the assessment focus more the cycle on organizational dealing with COVID?
I think there is no way that anyone can avoid it. And I think one of the key things to demonstrate, go back to the benchmarks, is to show how Dewa has performed in comparison to others within your ecosystem. I mean, one of the issues that we have, one of the struggles that we have with EFQM is when people are going through a challenging time, when they have an impact on their results, they don't want to come in for an assessment. But actually, from an assessment point of view, from a learning point of view, when an organization is going through a change, is really when you see how excellent they are. Because when it's plain sailing, it's easy to have everything ship shape and shiny. It's when you're going through a stressful time, it's when you're dealing with the storm, when you're in the midst of that you really understand how good an organization is. You can really see how agile they are, how people work together, how they creatively problem solve. So at this point in time, I can see massive learnings coming out from this and understanding, because every organization's been working, in the last few years on things like risk assessment and risk management. And it's really understanding now how effectively that understanding, you're from down to when you're picking up signals of the change through to how you deal with operational risks. How effectively did the preparation work help you deal with the COVID crisis? And I think that's, I think there's a huge learning opportunity there. I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think from an assessment point of view, it's going to make it more obvious who the really, really good organizations are based on how they've dealt with the pandemic. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt, for your detailed answer. Any further questions from any of the participants? We have still 15 minutes to go. If you have any questions, you can put across, you can request to unmute the mic.
Oh, I think with that...
Lala says thank you for the answer. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Prof. We will...
Yeah, I think there might be no further questions. We just want to repeat our sincere thanks and appreciation for you, Muhammad, from SKEA office, and indeed for Matt Fisher for this very, very useful and highly productive session. I'm sure it will be repeated sometime. We'll be coordinating that with the SKEA office in order to make sure the benefit covers more people. Thank you once again, and look forward to meeting soon.
Excellent.
Indeed.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Muhammad, for this for your time and actually useful workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farhan, for your kind words. We are always there to support you for any further questions or any queries or any information you need from us. We are there to support you. You can just drop an email with the list of questions if you have any. And if you need any sort of support, you can just ask for it. So we are there to support you. So any closing remarks, Matt, before we end the session?
No, other than good luck in the process. I think it's an exciting time, and we'll good luck with everything that goes forward.
How is the weather in Brussels, Matt?
Sorry?
Is it cold in Brussels?
No, and it's actually sunny today. So and it's Belgian National Day. So I shall, now we're finished, I can go out and enjoy the sunshine. I know in the UAE it's sunshine is not the same rare commodity as it is in Belgium.
Yeah, it's very sunny here.
Enjoy it. I just in July it's going to be too hot for me, to be honest. But here it's nice. I will enjoy a nice sunny day.
Enjoy your National Day. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So thank you, Brett. Enjoy your National Day celebrations. Thank you very much for this session.
Excellent.
And thank you all participants for taking our time for this important session. We wish you all good luck in the journey to sustainable excellence, and we wish you all success in the future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
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 Until then, see you next time. Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe.